All righty, I think we have arrived at our final formal session of Family Day. We will still be having the Q&A with our expert panel after this. But our formal final family session, say that 3 times fast, is Igniting Hope for HD. And please welcome back Dr. Martha Nance to lead this session.
So Charles and Aaron and I think I don't need a table. So for Aaron and Karen and
3 chairs total?
3 total. I'll stand. Well, does anybody understand research now better than you did when you got here this morning? I feel very sorry for E.J. Garner, who was, we paid her thousands of dollars in her volunteer job today as bell gonger for, any time somebody used a vocabulary word that was too big and she didn't bang her gong. So, thank God. So give E.J. a pat on the back before you leave today. So our last session, we've talked a lot about research, and I think Sarah kind of set up this last session by talking about hope. I think for many of us, we all hope for, a cure for HD, or at least better treatments for HD. But, that's sort of a long-term hope. I really wanted to spend this last session just talking about what gives you hope, whether you're a person with Huntington's, a family member, a photographer, a physician. What is it that actually gets you up in the morning and makes you keep slogging through, in Minnesota, slogging through the tundra in the winter? I've invited 3 folks to come up on the stage to join me. So Aaron Patterson and Charles Sabine and Karen Anderson come up. And I have to get my glasses. You sit in the middle, and Karen, you sit on the end.
I need to explain my T-shirt first. Is that okay? Nice.
Charles has changed since I last saw him at lunchtime.
I want you to see this. It's right. This is almost a Cincinnati Reds color, I understand, but it's actually from somewhere which I gave a lecture to a few years ago. A fantastic medical center just down the road here called the University of Cincinnati School of Medicine. And it is a great place which hasn't yet kind of completely embraced Huntington's, but we're going to get there with it. So hence, this is I've had this in my cupboard for 10 years, and now I get to have a purpose for it. Come on, Cincinnati.
And by the way, since we're talking about Cincinnati, the score of the Ohio State game is like 38-0 or something at the moment. Huh? 45-0. So really, you're not missing anything. Aaron and Charles are marvelous, amazing members of the Huntington's community. You may have met them if you've been here over the week, and I guess you can introduce yourselves when you come up a little bit. And Karen Anderson is one of my beloved colleagues, a psychiatrist at Georgetown University who's been engaged in Huntington's disease work for a long time and is the lead investigator in the project My HD Story that I think Victor alluded to earlier. So I just want to talk about hope, and I hope that some people in the audience will be moved as we talk about what gives us hope to maybe share a quick vignette or story or comment or statement about what gives you hope. But I'll just get you started. So I wanted to read a poem that I wrote that actually got published in this journal called the Examined Life Journal, which is kind of a medical literary journal. Hopefully I can do this without crying. So the poem is entitled Generations, and it goes like this. We watched together as your mother slowly descended through writhing, scratching, shrieking, to mute and unmoving. I sighed in relief to know your grandmother was your pillar, even as she endured the sufferings of her husband, 3 children, and then you, your brother, and 2 cousins. I remember the day you were diagnosed with Huntington's disease because I was the one who gave you the diagnosis. I've treated second cousins you didn't know you had. They shared your beautiful red hair and your terrible future. Your husband and I pleaded, but understood, when you announced your intent to stop eating, to exit before your disease could steal your humanity. This is the one I can't do. When from your deathbed you reminded me, you whispered, "My daughter's middle name is Hope." I cried all the way home. I like to believe you were smiling, and I know her baby girl was watching from her own father's arms as I gave your daughter the experimental injection designed to jam the tormenting copier of that twisted gene. So.
Hi, my name is Erin Patterson, and I'm an HD community member, and my dad has Huntington's disease, and I'm his caregiver, and I write books about HD, one of which you guys all got in your bag today when you registered. So I didn't know that Huntington's disease ran in my family until I was in my early 30s, and as it turns out, my grandmother had passed away from HD. It was the long-held family secret. I have very few memories of my grandmother because she died when I was 12 years old, but I do remember that my parents fought about her all of the time, and because they were fighting about her all the time, I grew to hate her and I blamed her for that. So when I went through genetic testing and tested gene positive for Huntington's disease, as I'm sure you can imagine, there are a lot of things that went through my head, including my grandmother. And I kept my diagnosis secret from many people for a very long time, and there was one huge big fear that was motivating me to do that. I was afraid that I was going to turn into my grandmother and turn into somebody that people hated. And it hurts me now, even all these years later, to say that. I was afraid that once people found out my genetic status, they would abandon me and I would end up alone and unloved for the rest of my life. It has been 18 years. I do have to say, I didn't know anybody from the HD community at that time, and I didn't have any positive examples of what it looked like to live with HD in your family. And it has been 18 years, approximately, since I went through genetic testing, and a lot of bad things have happened during that time. My parents have gotten separated, and my mom is not really involved in my dad's life anymore. My younger brother is not around, and most of my extended family don't even go visit my father anymore. And it's really hard, even though I understand why all of these things have happened, not to blame it on Huntington's disease. And somehow, during that time, I have become a caregiver for my dad. And it's not something that I set out to do intentionally. It's just as he needed help, I was there to help him with things. And I'm very lucky that he graciously asked for help and allowed me to help him. I know that is not always the case. So spectacularly, my dad is actually 81 years old, and he has late onset Huntington's disease. He can still walk with his walker, and he still makes it down to the dining hall of his retirement home every day to eat, and he's still able to eat on his own regular food, which I think is pretty outstanding. But I am in charge of everything else having to do with his life. I know everything about his medical history. I book all of his doctor's appointments and make sure to take him to all of his appointments. I make sure that he goes to all of his HD clinic visits, that he goes to his enroll assessments still to this day. And if he runs out of something, I have to order it for him, like shampoo or anything like that. And when he breaks his glasses, which he's already done 3 times this year, I have to get them fixed. But the biggest thing that I do is advocate for my dad whenever he ends up in the emergency department, which is quite often. I have to keep in constant contact with the hospital and educate them about HD and advocate for my dad and let them know how to treat him. And this can all be a little tricky as we live about 2 hours apart. Yeah. But the thing that gives me the biggest amount of hope is the grace that my dad shows when going through all of this. Even though my dad really can't talk anymore, he can only say a few words at a time. And even though he needs help with basic everyday tasks like getting dressed and taking his medicine and brushing his teeth, and even though there are some days when he's just too tired to walk and he has to be pushed in the wheelchair to go eat supper, and even though he broke his hip this January and was in hospital for 2 months learning how to walk again, and then broke his wrist as soon as he got out of hospital. Even through all of those things, my dad still has the desire to live. He is still a happy guy, and there is still value in his life. And I know my dad is still in there. I think, in fact, that we are closer now than we ever have been in our entire life. And I think that is in part because of Huntington's disease. Even though a lot of really bad things have happened, some amazing things have happened too. There are distant relatives or people who didn't even know my dad before he got sick who have stepped in to help. And when I go to visit my dad at the retirement home, people often pull me aside in the hallway and say things to me like, "Your dad is such a wonderful man," or "Your dad is so funny." And then they go on to tell me how he cracked a joke, even though he could barely talk. And there are 2 stories in particular that I learned of very recently that I just wanted to share because they give you a glimpse of my dad's everyday life. Every morning when my dad goes down for breakfast, he takes his walker and goes to the elevator, and there's 2 little old ladies that are sitting on the chairs next to the elevator every day, and they say, "Good morning, Rand. It's really nice to see you today." And my dad always replies, "You too." And then they go on to tell him about all of the activities that are happening in the building and invite him to come along because they want to spend time with him. And there is one caregiver that goes in to see my dad every day, and she takes him for a walk. And as a part of that walk, they do a little bit of physiotherapy because he's still trying to get back all of his abilities from his broken hip. And she said to him the other day, "You're doing so amazing, Rand." And he said, "I'm getting better." And she said, "Yes, you are." And he replied, "I want to." And that broke my heart and made me feel so hopeful all at the same time, because even with HD, he still wants to improve and he wants to get better. And there are so many staff people that are taking care of my dad who just treat him like he is a task that needs to get done before they move on to the next patient. And the thing that is really spectacular about this caregiver in particular is that she treats my dad like he's a human being. And that just, it's such an important thing for people to do. And these stories make me feel so good because they value the relationship they have built with my dad, even with HD. And this gives me hope and helps me continue to do the advocacy work that I do and pushing for a cure or treatment. But I know that even if there isn't a cure or treatment on time for me, that I am going to be okay because my dad has shown me what that looks like. And my dad is not only a good example for myself, he is a good example for my daughter, and she is witnessing all of these things, and she is learning to be a kind and caring human being, and she knows that one day she'll probably have to be doing these things for me. And there is hope and comfort in knowing that she is going to be way better prepared than I ever was. She is 12 years old, which is the age I was when my grandmother died, and she has recently written a book about her grandpa. It's called Bloopy the Alien Learns About HD, and it's a kid's picture book. And we really wanted to get it done on time so that we could have it here. And the night before I left, she's like, "Come on, Mom, just book me a last-minute airline ticket. I'll come with you." So this will be the 4th book that we have published about Huntington's disease. And I have no qualms about pulling her out of school for a week to be here if the book was ready on time, because I know that being here surrounded by this amazing community, she would have learned way more than she would have of an entire week at school. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to be a part of this community and to meet everyone and learn everybody's stories and see all of the amazing ways that you guys are also living your life, because that gives me hope for my future. So thank you so much.
So, hope. I think the simplest way I can describe why I have so much hope right now is to read from a script for something I'm about to go and say to about 40, is it? Young researchers, brilliant young researchers from all across the United States, graduates and postgraduates we're encouraging, thanks to these brilliant people here, to come into our field. And one of the things I say to them, I'm going to open with these words: so in the next 20 minutes, I am going to show you how the most exciting and collaborative area of scientific research right now is, without doubt, the disease which has decimated my family. And then I'm going to explain to them more about that and why that is the case. And I mean that. It really is the most exciting area of research. You can trust me on that. So that's that. That's hope. And so then what Martha said, she was, right, we don't want to just talk about the usual things I talk about when I go around the world, but just she said, give me one moment which is above all else a moment of emotion. And it was a day in May of 2017. It might be that some of you were there, or that you may have seen the film, which I'll tell you about afterwards, about that day. But first of all, I'm going to show you something we showed that day. It was a film I'd made in South America and Latin America, and as you watch, you will see who we made it for. Your Holiness, the last person you saw in that film is a 15-year-old girl from Buenos Aires called Brenda, and accompanied by Axel, the singer from Buenos Aires as well. She is going to present you a scroll describing the goals of this event for the Huntington's community. And we brought those people that were in that film from the villages that they had never left before to the Vatican to meet their Pope, including these girls, these ladies here, two sisters called Soto, their family, a family from Barranquitas, Venezuela, which provided much of the blood for Jim Gasella to locate the marker for the Huntington gene on July 15th, 1983, one of the most important moments in the history of genetics. And for those who might not know this, there's a lady in behind them, if you look to the right, in blue with white hair there. And for those of you who know the extraordinary story of this gene hunting, that's the Professor Nancy Wexler, who led that team to Venezuela. You see her there clapping now, waving. A legend of the Huntington's community. The most important moments in the history of genetics, that was. And yet, before that day at the Vatican, no world leader had ever met an HD person on a world stage, or even spoken the words Huntington's disease on a global platform. So, if you have not seen it, there is a film about that day and the months leading up to it, Dancing at the Vatican, and if you haven't seen it, you really should. It's only 38 minutes long, and it's available on Amazon Prime, but don't do that because you'll give that money for that. So go to watch it on YouTube, which is free. But just look into, Dancing at the Vatican. You can see it either just by putting that into YouTube or on the Hidden No More website, which has that in it. And there is quite a story, really. When you watch the film, you'll see that there are these, there are three people from left to right. The one in the middle, that lady, Delia, an extraordinary woman who, as you will see, had 9 children, 8 of whom had Huntington's disease. And she lived in a very remote part of Colombia, where there's absolutely no health services or whatsoever. So having nursed her husband to death with the disease, and when I say, I mean literally with no help at all, nothing. Every last spoonful she had to feed him with. She then had to do the same with 8 children. Every single one of them. And not only did she have to lift them and feed them, and with the spoons, you see this in the film, what she is doing. And she was doing that every single day. She was 82 years old, okay? And she had to rebury her children because she couldn't afford the plots in the graveyard, because she had to pay for individual plots. So she'd had to take out some of the bones of her children and put the bones of the other children together because she couldn't afford separate graves. That's how poor they were. Next to her is Brenda, who you've probably heard a little bit of me introducing her. She was a girl, 15-year-old girl at that time with JHG, and as you see, quite symptomatic. The lovely story that you will see. I shouldn't really be kind of spoiling it. What do you think? Can I give them the punchline? Because it's a bit of a sort of make a wish thing. But I'll tell you anyway, because then you can show it to other people.
Work that Charles did to make this happen.
So basically, you know what I'll do is I'll tell you that Brenda was from Buenos Aires, back streets of Buenos Aires, and she had a hero, a pin-up on her wall of a pop singer from Buenos Aires who had 250 million hits for his most recent song. He's a huge star. And that's what I'll say. So watch the film and see what happened. And then the little boy there, Anyevi, okay, he was a little younger, probably 13 then. And when I went to visit him in Barranquillas, I said, "So, Anyevi, what do you like doing?" And like most 13-year-old South American boys, he loved soccer. That was his thing. And I said, yeah, okay, and do you play much? And he said, no, I don't have anyone to play with, and I don't have a ball. Because none of the other children wouldn't touch him or go near him because he was from a Huntington's family and he had a bit of Huntington's. So no, he had no one to play with. And I said, well, can't you play on your own? He said, no, I can't afford a football. So, soccer ball, I should say, but you know what I mean. So I said, okay, fine. Then when we were waiting for the Pope to come into the Vatican, I said, okay, Anjervi, I want you to come up here first. And amazing, you know, imagine this is a 13-year-old boy from a village in the middle of nowhere. He never left that village, ever. Imagine. They didn't have birth certificates, let alone passports, these people, right? He'd never seen an airplane other than in the sky. And yet, he stood up on that stage in front of 2,000 people and came up, and I said, so, Anjervi, you told me that you love soccer, so who is your favorite player? And he said, Neymar Jr. Neymar is, for those of you who know soccer, a massive, massive star who now plays for PSG. At that time, he played for Barcelona. And so I said, okay, well, you know what? You told me that you didn't have a football, because you could get, so we've got you a soccer ball. And it was, I said, then there was someone going to bring it up for him. So I said, bring it up, and it was a special ball because it was the ball that had been used in the UEFA Champions League final the week before. So I said, okay, now you've got a soccer ball to play with. And I said, oh, there's something else, right? And I said, what was it? And I said, oh, and this guy who brought up the ball had this, oh, it's this shirt. And it was a Neymar number 11 shirt in his size, signed to Anjervi from Neymar Jr., have a lovely day on the back. So by now, he's kind of like, you know, this is quite a day, right? So he puts it on, and funnily enough, in all of the pictures, in all of the in all the newspapers around the world, you'll see the Pope hugging this little boy with a Neymar shirt on. So that was his Neymar shirt, and I said, oh, there's something else, one more thing. I said, look over there. There was a screen just like that. So he stood there, and this little handsome man in Barcelona came up and said, hey guys, hi Anjervi, this is Neymar Jr., have a wonderful day. There's a video. It was him remote from Barcelona. So I said, now, Anjervi, now the other kids will play soccer with you, okay? And they did. Anyway, so there, watch that. Watch Dancing in the Back. If you haven't seen it, some of you probably have, but it's a nice little short film. And if there's anything else you want to know about my story, I did record something for the TED platform recently, and I think that what I would use this for, if you want, is a way of explaining in lay terms what it is these scientists are doing, you know, for us, and why, and how grateful we should all be, and how, more than anything, we are not the awful criminal classes that we were described in America and in Britain in the 1930s, but actually something much, 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 much more special. So if you haven't seen it, that's the talk for the TED platform, and pass that on to anyone else to watch it so that they all maybe understand a little bit more about our global community. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Karen Anderson, and Martha asked me to say a little bit about what gives me hope. I would say seeing all of you here. I started working in Huntington's disease as a psychiatrist back in the 1990s, And there still was a real lack of awareness and a lot of shame about the disease. And I think efforts like we've heard about today, I think these go such a long way. And all of you who come out in public and attend events go such a long way to show people that this is not a disease to be afraid of. These are not people to be shunned and avoided. And that we are making such terrific progress in this disease. So I think we really should have a lot of hope about HD right now. I'm going to talk with you about some research that we're doing in the Huntington Study Group that I think is really important because it helps us to understand more about what Huntington's disease is like for people who live with the disease and for their caregivers. So this is called My HD Story, and you may have seen advertising for it out on the tables. So really, I'm the principal investigator, the leader of the My HD Story platform. We decided to create this online research platform because we have this problem. We have regulators like the FDA who don't understand a rare disease like Huntington's. They may make assumptions about patients and about what's important to patients. We as academics do this. We assume we know what you value in terms of treating a symptom, what bothers you the most, but really we need to understand it from your perspective. So the question was, can a population of people with HD who may have cognitive or psychiatric impairments, who may have difficulty using technical devices because of movements, can they actually report about what bothers them in a disease? So again, we created My HD Story as a completely online research opportunity open to everybody from the HD community so that there wasn't the barrier of having to come into a research site. This is something you can do completely from your own home. And the idea is to connect people with HD with people who are doing research, with the drug regulators, and the people who are developing the drugs, all these fantastic drug companies you've heard about today. And how we do this is through what's called patient-reported outcomes. So the wonderful thing about an online platform is that when it works, you can do it really fast, right? So if I was running a drug study and I needed 500 patients to do one of these big studies you hear about, it would take me probably 2 years to recruit this. But with something like My HD Story, we opened recruitment in March, and really by August, we had about 600 people who had signed up and done some of the assessments. So we did it very, very quickly, which is a huge advantage, saves lots of time and money. We got people from all over the US to do this. One of the interesting things, so we had 345 people who did all of the questionnaires on the site, so I'll be talking mostly about that bunch. So one of the interesting things we found is that we were reaching a group that really had not gotten much HD care, but also had not done much HD research. So when you look on the bottom there, you see only about 30% had been in some kind of a research trial. Only about 20% had done an observational study like Enroll HD. So we were really reaching this group of people that often don't get to participate in research. Some of the results we found, and I don't have time to tell you everything, it was very interesting, but some of the results we found were we asked people to tell us in their own words, so they could type their words or they could tell us through a microphone that would dictate it into the computer, what bothers you the most about your HD? As a psychiatrist, I expected this, but many of the other people on the project were surprised. So when you look here and you see that big blue circle, the most common things that bothered people were cognitive, so thinking problems, and psychiatric problems like depression, anxiety, irritability. People did report some movement symptoms like chorea and balance problems. That's what you see there in yellow. And there were some people who reported both. Some people said, I have depression and I also have trouble with my balance together as one thing. And that's where you see the two circles overlap. But it was very interesting and I think eye-opening for a lot of people that cognitive, memory, thinking, concentration, and emotional symptoms were so important to people. Then in the big gray circle there, you see the people who said, yes, I have HD, but I don't have a problem that bothers me right now from HD. So more interesting results. So again, we use this really powerful online tool to reach all these people who typically don't participate in research studies. We found that the psychiatric and memory and cognitive symptoms were the most prominent ones, but we still have a lot to learn about doing this type of online research. So I'm happy to say that we have 2 more studies that are now open on the platform, and we would love to have any of you who are interested and eligible participate in these studies. So we have one called LEAD HD, which again gives people with HD the chance to report on their symptoms. There's one part that's a checklist where we're looking at, predetermined symptoms, and you can check off what bothers you. And then there's another part where you can again report in your own words. You can dictate, or you can type on the phone, or you can dictate by speaking and tell us what bothers you the most and how it impacts you day to day. And then we have another one called Project Aware, where patients and caregivers can tell us about the barriers to doing research. So what keeps you from being able to participate in research? So thank you again to all of you who have done my HD story, and please, if you haven't signed up, please think about doing it and giving 30 minutes or an hour of your time to the study. Thank you.
So I invited Karen to talk because I think this is a research study that actually offers you the opportunity to kind of talk about what's important to you. And part of that is what bothers you. The flip side of that is what do you look forward to, what gives you hope. We now have ice cream outside in the foyer, and then we will have also a Ask the Experts group. So if you need to leave, you can leave. If you have burning questions, either come back and say them out loud to our expert group or the little box in the back. And I'd like you, when you go out to get your ice cream, practice telling somebody what gives you hope. So I really would like you to tell somebody a story that made you feel good, that made you get up the next morning. So thank you so much for coming. Bless you for spending your whole day. We'll move forward.